Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. I must return home late Friday evening around 7 o'clock. Charles Byrne and I were on a business trip to present our company's products to potential major clients. At first glance, everything seemed to be going well, at least from our perspective. However, we were expecting definitive results in a few weeks. At 9 in the morning on Friday, we received word that the scheduled meeting was postponed. There was no point in staying, so we headed back. There were a few things waiting for me at home, things Samantha had been constantly reminding me about. The thought of coming home earlier than expected brought relief. I would have time to finally get everything done. Charles dropped me off at home around 3 in the afternoon, and without wasting time I changed into work clothes and grabbed my tools. A few years ago, we had expanded the house by adding an extra bedroom and bathroom. This expansion gave our 2 children their own rooms, although they weren't home at the time. When they were little, managing everything in a confined space was difficult. To save money, we built the addition on an elevated platform rather than a full foundation. In the bathroom closet, I installed a hatch to access the crawl space beneath the house. There was also a removable panel in the backyard, through which you could enter or exit if necessary. To open the hatch, you had to slightly close the closet doors so they wouldn't obstruct its movement. After gathering my tools, I headed into the crawl space under the bedroom. It was about 1 meter high, but it was still cramped and uncomfortable to move around. I crawled toward the pipes beneath the main bathroom, checking the traps I had set. The rat poison I'd laid out remained almost untouched, and was still effective. A year ago, we had a problem with red squirrels. I never told Samantha about it, but I bought a shotgun and spent the whole weekend downstairs, imagining myself as a sheriff in the Wild West, hunting down those pesky squirrels. Samantha had gone to her sister's, so the house was entirely mine. I must have fired at least 12 shots at those critters. When the weekend ended, I got tired of it and sealed up the hole they were entering through, leaving the poison there just in case. Now I was under the tub, trying to remove a rusted drain that was slowing the water flow so much that the tub nearly overflowed every time we showered. No pipe cleaners had worked, so I decided either to clean or replace the pipe. But first, I had to loosen the old connections. I was almost done when I suddenly heard footsteps upstairs, breaking the silence. It was too early for Samantha to be home, and no one else should have been in our bedroom. As I fumbled with the pipe, I suddenly heard the sound of running water, and a small flood rushed down from above. I quickly headed for the hatch to warn Samantha that she couldn't use the water. As I approached the closet, I heard a man's voice, and alarm shot through me. My stomach clenched. Cautiously, I lifted myself up from the hatch to peek into the closet. The doors were slightly ajar, keeping me hidden. Through the narrow crack, I saw Samantha calmly undressing. But my heart raced not because of her relaxed demeanor. Robert Murphy was standing at the foot of our bed. Realizing that I was about to witness something I would never be able to forget, my pulse quickened. If I didn't act right now, I would witness my supposedly faithful wife betraying me right before my eyes. "I love being with you, Samantha," Robert said with a smile, taking off his shirt and unbuttoning his pants. Frozen in shock, I realized I was already too late. Samantha, now completely naked, climbed onto the bed, laughing cheerfully. "We have about an hour before I need to clean up and get ready for Michael to come home," she said in a light-hearted tone. "An hour is enough for a few rounds," Robert replied with a smirk. I had always considered myself a reasonable person, but at that moment, rage boiled inside me. My face burned and my knees buckled, that overwhelming sensation when you're pushed to your absolute limit. "Looks like you've thought this through, Robert," Samantha grinned, completely at ease in her betrayal. "When I get everything sorted out, you can do whatever you want with me. You know very well how much I like what you do. Just make sure it stays unnoticed. If he ever finds out, he'll go crazy. I don't want to hurt him." "You're such a fool," Robert smirked. "Do you really believe that? Or are you just trying to convince me? If you truly cared about him, you wouldn't be lying here with me completely naked. You don't care about Michael just like I don't." "That's not true, Robert." Samantha objected. "He's a wonderful husband, a loving father, and provides us with everything we need. I just want a little more excitement in life. I don't want to lose him. I love him." "Well, I'm not complaining," Robert shrugged. "But you sure have a strange way of showing your love." Samantha laughed. "Oh, Robert, that was good. I love Michael." She hesitated and then quietly added, "But I love you too. I want both of you." A cold, anxious calm washed over me, the kind someone probably feels before something unimaginably terrible. "Let's get on with it already," Samantha whispered, breathless with excitement. While Robert indulged in his passion with her, I quietly slipped down to the basement and went through the hidden exit. Walking around the house, I noticed Robert's SUV parked in the driveway. Samantha must have come with him since her car wasn't there. Grabbing a hammer and a cordless drill, I crouched by the rear wheel and drilled into it. The air hissed out and the tire deflated with a soft pop. One by one, I punctured all 4 tires, even making sure to destroy the spare. Then, I took the hammer and smashed the headlights and windows. Each strike filled me with grim satisfaction. The destruction was oddly calming. My neighbor always kept a spare key hidden on the porch, and he allowed me to use his house when needed. Once inside, I picked up the phone and dialed Robert's number. We were well acquainted. Robert and his wife had been close friends of ours, or so I thought. Samantha worked with him, and I never realized how close they had become. Wrapping the phone in a towel to muffle my voice, I pretended to be a concerned neighbor when Robert's wife, Elizabeth, answered. I told her that someone had been spotted damaging her husband's car outside Michael Smith's house. After hanging up, I returned home, taking the hammer and drill with me. Leaving anything behind that could trace back to me would have been foolish. My mind wasn't entirely clear, but I wasn't acting impulsively. I knew I'd be the prime suspect. Faithful husbands always are. I sneaked back into the basement and retrieved the shotgun I had stored on a shelf, sealed in a plastic bag to keep it in perfect condition. The phone kept ringing insistently, but Samantha was too preoccupied to notice. The voicemail kicked in, but I couldn't make out the message. It was probably Elizabeth already on her way. Climbing up to the hatch, I could hear the sounds of their activities. Moans, heavy breathing, and the rhythmic creaking of the bed. I cracked the door of the closet just enough to see into the bedroom. Robert and Samantha were completely absorbed in their affair, oblivious to everything around them. They were nearing their climax. I stood just 10 feet away. With grim precision, I aimed the shotgun. The blast hit Robert right in the groin. The sound of impact was horrific. His scream was immediate, his body jerking violently in agony. He lunged forward, slamming Samantha's head into the headboard with a sickening thud. Her pain was nothing compared to Robert's torment. Watching him writhe, clutching his mutilated body, I quickly hid the gun, slipped through the panel, and left the house. I closed the panel behind me and calmly walked across the yard without looking back. As I strolled through the neighborhood, my mind was remarkably clear. I headed toward the pub just a few blocks from home. After an exhausting day, I decided I deserved the luxury of enjoying a few bottles of beer. Few could boast the same mastery of weapons as I could. Savoring a cold sip, my thoughts drifted to the chaos likely unfolding just a few blocks from my hotel. It was nearing 5 in the evening when my phone unexpectedly vibrated. Elizabeth's name flashed on the screen. "Michael, where are you?" Her voice was calm, though there was a trace of urgency. I replied smoothly, lying without hesitation. "We're driving on the highway. What happened?" She didn't delay with her response. "I'm at the hospital. Robert is in surgery, and Samantha has been admitted to the emergency room." Her words caught me off guard. "What? What are you talking about?" "They weren't in a car accident, if that's what you're thinking," Elizabeth clarified. "It's much more complicated. I can't explain much over the phone, but Samantha is under observation. They fear she may fall into a coma." The mention of a coma tightened my nerves. "She has a concussion," Elizabeth continued. "I just wanted you to know where she is, so it wouldn't be a surprise when you return." I responded cautiously. "Thank you, Elizabeth. I don't usually lose my composure, but I appreciate the warning." "I'm heading home to get my car, and then going to the hospital, she said. You'll see Robert's car in the driveway. It's wrecked. The tires are flat. The entire car's a mess, but you'll be able to drive around it, she warned. Sounds like a total disaster, I muttered. If needed, I'll take Samantha's car. Her car isn't there, Elizabeth interrupted. The story is much longer, and I'd prefer to explain everything when you get here. With that, our conversation ended. I sat there, contemplating the situation. None of this was what I had anticipated, and irritation began to simmer within me. As the evening progressed and the sky darkened, I finally decided to head back home. When I arrived, a small crowd had gathered near my driveway, gawking at the wrecked car. I ignored them, cutting through neighboring yards and slipping into the house through the back door. Entering the bedroom to change, I realized something was seriously wrong. The room was in disarray, furniture overturned, clothes scattered everywhere, and dark stains on the carpet. That's when it hit me. It seemed I had done more damage to Robert than I had realized. I couldn't suppress a smirk as I recalled him writhing in pain, clutching himself. He had enjoyed his time with my wife, and had apparently decided to test his luck with me. To be honest, he was fortunate I hadn't brought a gun. A man who dares to have an affair with another's wife must be prepared for the consequences. By the time I reached the hospital, it was around 9 p.m. The people waiting outside, vultures, as I called them, looked almost gleeful at my arrival. After what seemed like endless paperwork and insurance matters, I quietly muttered to myself, "Why is everything in Spanish here? This is America. We speak English here." Finally, I was led to the room where Samantha lay. She looked fragile, much weaker than I had expected. When our eyes met, she managed a faint smile, nervously fidgeting with her hands. "How are you holding up, Samantha?" I asked, my voice softer than I had intended. "Does it hurt a lot?" "My head hurts, but the doctors are just being cautious," she replied quietly. "They want to make sure there's no internal bleeding or anything serious, but I'm feeling a little better." Then, almost shyly, she asked, "Did you happen to bring me any clothes? They're planning to discharge me." "Samantha, I didn't bring anything for you. Why don't you just wear what you had on when you got here?" My words came out harsher than I intended. "Where are your clothes?" Her response was confused, full of uncertainty. I wasn't wearing anything. I think I slipped and hit my head in the shower. The last thing I remember is getting ready for a bath, and then I was in an ambulance. I didn't have anything on," she almost shouted, her voice trembling with panic. This had to be humiliating. "Yes, I understand," I replied, though my sympathy felt distant. "But what the hell happened to Robert's car? Why is it parked in our driveway? And where is your car? And why is our bedroom such a mess? What happened with Robert?" I bombarded her with questions, but Samantha's face remained blank. "I don't know, Michael. Please stop asking. I have a headache. I feel nauseous. I just can't," she begged, her voice shaking. "Yeah, I feel the same," I muttered, showing my irritation. "Just rest. I'll be here when the doctors let you go." I turned away, needing to find Elizabeth. Eventually, I found her in the ICU. As I approached, she gave me a tired smile. "He's stable, Michael. They had to remove his left testicle, but he's resting now," she whispered. "If he makes it through the night without complications, they'll move him to a regular room in the morning," she added softly. "Oh God," I breathed, stunned. "He lost. How did this happen?" "We didn't get a clear version from either Robert or Samantha," Elizabeth explained, shaking her head. "Some guy called me, said he was your neighbor. He mentioned that someone had wrecked Robert's car in your yard. I tried calling Samantha, but she didn't answer, so I left a message and drove over. When I arrived, Robert was still in the car, completely out of it. Some random guy had stopped to help." Elizabeth paused for a moment, collecting her thoughts. "This man said that Robert was completely naked, running around the car and shouting. Then Robert jumped back into the car, insisting he was driving to the hospital. The guy took his keys, afraid that Robert was either on something or something else, especially with a flat tire. He didn't want Robert driving in that state." "And then what?" I asked, feeling the weight of the situation intensify. I think Robert got hurt on the broken glass in the car. There were shards everywhere. He was bleeding from his back and... Well, from there, Elizabeth continued, her voice steady despite the horrifying details. We called an ambulance, and just then, that man cursed. I looked up and saw Samantha stumbling down the driveway, completely naked. What happened next? I asked, my shock growing. She was incoherent, Elizabeth admitted. She was holding her head, groaning. When I got her to sit down, I saw a huge bump on her forehead. I've been with Robert ever since. Did you talk to her? Yes. She says her memory is foggy, I explained, still trying to piece together the whole story. We grabbed coffee and continued discussing the bizarre situation. Elizabeth mentioned that Robert remembered eating sushi that day. He thinks maybe the food was bad or someone spiked their drinks, she said, though her voice sounded doubtful. I've had bad food before too, but I've never lost my memory or, well, a body part because of it, I said, shaking my head. Does he really believe the sushi caused the accident and Samantha's injury? Elizabeth gave a weak smile. I know it sounds ridiculous, but I can't think of anything more logical. Their behavior is so strange. Maybe Robert really crashed the car while in some sort of trance. Maybe, I muttered, though nothing about this situation seemed normal. I felt the weight of something much larger looming over me, realizing that I had been drawn into a situation far more serious than I had anticipated. If Robert took all the blame, I could avoid any legal consequences. I kept up the act of being angry, knowing I wouldn't regret it, especially if it allowed me to get away clean. Make sure you tell the police if they ask, I warned him. There's probably no law against wrecking your own car. We spent about an hour trying to figure everything out. Then, a little after 11 p.m., I got a call saying Samantha needed to stay overnight at the hospital for observation. After saying goodbye to Elizabeth, I left, feeling a pang of sympathy for her. She didn't deserve to be dragged into this mess, though on the other hand, neither did I. But to be honest, maybe I did deserve it. After all, I had shot Robert in the left testicle. Sleep wouldn't come, so I finished fixing the drain, cleaned up my tools, then threw the drill, the shotgun, and the hammer into the river, like some petty criminal. The police hadn't come after me yet, but I acted as if they had, just to cover my tracks. Once done, I tidied up the bedroom and changed the sheets. I also prepared the guest room and stayed there for the night. I was still sound asleep when the phone rang at 8 a.m. It was Samantha. Michael, they're discharging me, she said. Can you come pick me up and bring some clothes? I picked her up, helped her to the bedroom since she was moving slowly, put her in pajamas, and laid her in bed. She slept most of the day. Around noon, Elizabeth called to say Robert was going to be fine. He'd be discharged in a few days. I sat with that information for a while, realizing that I didn't care whether he recovered or not. He was still the same scumbag he'd always been. After ending the call, I went to check on Samantha. How's Robert? What happened to him? She asked. No one's really sure, I replied. He'll recover, but there's something important he's missing now. I watched her reaction closely. She simply closed her eyes, let a few tears fall, and drifted back to sleep. Later in the evening, I made her some soup and helped her eat. Her complexion had improved, and she was talking a bit more. But none of that changed anything. She still didn't say anything significant. No mentions of how she and Robert had ruined everything. No confession about the affair. Are you going to bed soon, Michael? She asked softly, with a barely noticeable smile. I miss you, she added. Her words lingered in the air, but I couldn't erase the image of her with him. I still heard her telling Robert he could do whatever he wanted with her. At that moment, I realized I might never share a bed with her again. No, I replied. I'm going to watch some TV. Rest up. You'll feel better in the morning, I said, turning off the light and heading to the guest room. I fell asleep quickly. The next morning, sunlight filled the windows, and when I woke up, I saw Samantha standing by the bed looking slightly better. Why did you sleep here, Michael? She asked. I wanted you with me. I think I'll stay here a few more nights, I said. You need to focus on regaining your strength and your memory. I don't want to be a burden. She looked at me, sadness in her eyes, before quietly leaving the room. I didn't have the strength to meet her gaze or say anything more. It seemed she sensed that. In the end, the police concluded that Robert had lost control and trashed his own car. He didn't even try to deny it. I had a feeling he knew that if he started denying it, the truth would come out, and the affair with Samantha would become public knowledge. It was easier for him to let everyone think he had a nervous breakdown or was poisoned by something. Samantha showed no interest in his condition during his recovery, so the day after he was discharged from the hospital, I went to check on him. Elizabeth came with me. "Robert," I called him with a smirk, "you'd better get well soon, or you'll never beat me at golf." He looked at me, his gaze lingering as if he was trying to figure out whether I knew about the mess he had gotten himself into. I looked him in the eyes calmly, not giving anything away. After what felt like an eternity, he finally responded, "Of course, Michael, if you say so." It became clear to me that when a person loses part of themselves, they become more cautious, more careful. He had changed, become quieter, more thoughtful. Samantha didn't return to work until Tuesday. I drove her there because her car was still in the office parking lot. She didn't explain anything about what had happened, and I didn't ask, not after that heated conversation we had the first night in the hospital. I began to wonder if I had jumped to conclusions too quickly, whether I should try to fix things. I had invested so much in our 15-year marriage and her. Until the day I found Robert in our bed with her, I believed we had something unbreakable. People make mistakes, I told myself, and many marriages go through hard times. But the next day, as I sat at the kitchen table sorting the mail, I found a letter from the hospital. It was crystal clear. Samantha had contracted gonorrhea, and I needed to get tested immediately. She had to start treatment without delay. I read the letter twice before handing it to her. Looking back, I shouldn't have been surprised. Robert had never hidden his attraction to other women. I used to dismiss it as harmless jokes. But now I saw everything clearly. He wasn't just talking. He was exactly the man I once thought he was joking about. And the fact that he was a one-armed con man somehow made me chuckle. As Samantha read the letter, I could almost see the calculations happening in her head. Was she wondering if I could have infected her? Could I have cheated on her without knowing it and passed the infection to her? If my test came back positive, she could spin the situation to make me the villain in all of this. But the truth is, I had always been faithful. If anyone crossed the line, it was her. "Well, it seems you didn't just come back with fond memories from your little adventure," she said with a smirk. "No wonder you're sleeping in the guest room." At that moment, everything became crystal clear to me. She didn't regret it. She was calculating. She wanted to make it seem like I was the guilty one, and she was the victim. She didn't even consider that I had been faithful all along. People tend to project their flaws onto others. A thief thinks everyone steals. A cheater thinks everyone cheats. That Saturday morning, I placed my negative test results on the kitchen table in front of her. Her hands trembled as she picked up the paper to read. Then I handed her another document. This time, it was divorce papers. For the first time in a long while, I saw a genuine reaction from her. She begged, said that Robert had seduced her, but her heart had always belonged to me, and only me. While she was pleading with me to reconsider, my phone rang. I answered, and Samantha immediately fell silent. It was Elizabeth on the other end of the line. "Michael, I got my test results. Do you remember why Robert lost one of his testicles?" "Well, I tested positive for gonorrhea. Did you get tested? And what about Samantha?" I paused for a moment, considering how much of the truth Elizabeth deserved. "No, Elizabeth," I replied. "I'm clean. But Samantha, she's not." "Isn't this the most absurd turn of events?" I replied, catching her question. "Absurd is putting it mildly, Michael. It's downright outrageous," Elizabeth grumbled. "I've already started getting professional help and made my decision. I'm going to break ties with that madman for good. Oh, and Michael, by the way, do you happen to have a gun?" "I really need to finish packing, Elizabeth. I wish you all the best," I said before ending the conversation. Samantha didn't just destroy our 15-year marriage, she ruined her own life and Elizabeth's marriage. I deeply regret wasting 15 years of my life on that wretched woman. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel.